Creativity, community, and jazz education are key values for German-born saxophonist and jazz educator Timo Vollbrecht. He's a mild-spoken man, and it's not apparent that he enjoys his role of a scholar as much as he does as a band leader whose musical interests embrace merging electronica with acoustic jazz. Hi, I'm Steve Browngen, and you're listening to Strictly Jazz Sounds, your place for conversations about all things jazz. Despite his mild demeanor, it's obvious that Timo Vollbrecht is a leader. His career has taken him from Berlin, Germany, to Brooklyn, New York, and now he's at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where he is Professor Vollbrecht. He's the director of jazz studies at Brown University, arriving by way of New York University, where he was an adjunct professor and where he received his PhD. His passion? Well, it's 21st century experimental electric-infused music, merging the sonic colors and texture of electronic sounds with acoustic, intricate song forms. What's even more important to Timo, though, is the community he keeps. He loves to play with his band. He truly enjoys being with his friends and commune on the bandstand, and he loves hanging out in a pub. In this episode, we talk about his band Fly Magic and the magic they perform. Timo describes how he synthesizes his music on his latest recording, Givers and Takers, and even gives us a taste of it. And he talks about how important community is to him as a person as well as a musician. Timo Vollbrecht and I spent some time talking about some of these things and more earlier this year. If you have not already, please subscribe, and this is your opportunity to receive notice of future episodes of Strictly Jazz Sounds. This is Steve Browngen with Strictly Jazz Sounds, and we have Timo Vollbrecht. And welcome.
Thank you, Stephen.
Glad to have you. Now, I'm not going to embarrass you first. I saw the clip with you and your alto saxophone when you were just a little take. So I'm not going to talk about that, but I am. Oh, that's right. I did mention about it, didn't I? The work that you've done over the years, you started off with piano. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I wanted to play saxophone from when I was really tiny, because I had a toy saxophone as a kid, and my father was listening to a lot of jazz. So I wanted to play the saxophone, and when I asked my parents for lessons, which is what I did. They had no idea. They're not musicians, so they went to the local band director and asked them, my son wants to take saxophone lessons, and apparently that person said, I think he's too small, like physically, so he should start out either on recorder or piano. And then they presented that choice to me, and I immediately said, okay, then let's start with piano. But then a year later, apparently I was tall enough to get a saxophone.
A young person's mouth is not formed properly. Isn't that correct? At least I was told that when I started playing sax, but I didn't start playing sax until I was in junior high school.
Yeah, I think that's definitely totally fine to start at that age. Yeah, I'm not sure about the anatomy at that age. I don't know if that's a correct thing to say, that a 9-year-old can't play saxophone. I don't know. I started at the age of 10.
So you started out on piano and went to alto sax, and you have not gravitated to any other saxophone. Isn't that right?
Well, I did, because I started listening to Sonny Rollins at the age of 14, 15, fell in love with Sonny and got really, really deep into it. And then at some point I had to change to the tenor. So I became a tenor player.
So answer this question for me. How did you move from the acoustic sound of Sonny Rollins to the electronic sound that you now have? What gravitated you? What was the process?
It was mainly playing with folks that were into that kind of stuff. Everyone always says, oh, the records are your greatest teachers, which is partly true. But I also would say that really the friends you play with are your greatest teachers and biggest influences. So early on I started, I moved to Berlin at the age of 19 maybe, to pursue a career in jazz. I'm from Germany originally, so I grew up in a smaller town near Hanover in the northwest of Germany, and Berlin is the big hub for improvised music in Germany. So I got into the conservatory there, moved there, and started playing with folks who were really into like kind of like this intersection of jazz, improvised music, but also more indie stuff. They were listening to Radiohead a lot, and so pretty early on I started working with guitar a lot, guitars with pedals, and I got really into the electro-acoustic blend and timbre thing, and I started to be really interested in sound. And as a saxophone player in general, I think you naturally are occupied with the idea of sound because you're working on your sound the entire time, right? It's like the big thing. How do I express myself as a saxophone player? And the sound is one of the things that you really work on. So when I started putting my bands together, I tried to extend this thought further. It's like, what are the coolest and most captivating, interesting sound collages that I can come up with? And I really like being an acoustic instrument. I always had the tendency to team up with people who could add different hues sonically to it. So it's especially this link with guitar is something that I've always really loved.
The different tones, the colors that it emits, it almost begs for you to include that in your work. It's really clear throughout what you're doing and what you have been doing ever since you started recording as a group leader. You know, one of the things that struck me, I'm remarking about this because of the days that I was listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, going way back. I think that's before your time, but Emerson, Lake and Palmer in the sounds that they wanted to do with synthesizers. Now you have a guitarist, and you have an amazing guitarist. The sounds that you get from that guitar are astounding. Why don't you tell a little bit about him?
Yeah, the guitarist's name is Keisuke Matsuno. He's actually also from Berlin, and we both came to New York in 2010 at the same time. And we knew each other already back in Germany, but not very well, or we weren't super close. But since we came here at the same time, and we connected and started hanging out and started playing a lot of music together. We were practicing together. We were experimenting together. So he's been my closest musical ally, so to speak. The pandemic kind of washed him back to Europe, so we've been apart. But he was even the best man at my wedding, so he's yeah, we're really close friends, and we've been on the road for almost 13 years now. So for this record that I just released, Givers and Takers, I decided to add a synthesizer player on top of the guitar. So we have drums, saxophone, which are the two acoustic instruments, plus or juxtaposing with guitar and his sound magic, because he uses a lot of sound effects. And also my buddy Elias Stemmeseder, Austrian cat, who's in New York, who plays synth bass in the left hand, and then the right hand either other synthesizers or piano, depending on what the tune calls for or what he thinks is the best decision at that point in time. So it became a lot more a blend of electronics and acoustics on this record more than before.
Keisuke had said something like he really enjoyed playing with you because of the space, the freedom that you provide for your fellow musicians, your band members. Is that how you approach the music? You approach recording?
Glad to know that he said that. I don't know when or where he said that, but he that's what I try to do. As a band leader, there's so many different approaches to band leading. There are the people that come in with a very clear idea and kind of try to mold all the players and to jump on their musical vision. And then the other pole, the other extreme, is the people who are like, let everything happen and kind of take themselves aback. I think I'm probably more in the middle, but I'm tilting toward I'm really about, so I do have a vision, like a musical idea. I also recognize that the players that I ask for my projects have an immense creative potential and their own ideas, and I want to take advantage of that in a positive way, right? I want them to be able to also shape the music. So it's really important as a composer not to fall in love with your ideas too much, for them to be able to be taken into different directions. On this particular record and the repertoire, we actually didn't rehearse. We rehearsed. We did one preliminary rehearsal, but we went on the road. So kind of the old Miles Davis approach. I really try to let the music go into all kinds of different directions each night, and using the stage as a laboratory. So when we went into the studio, to the recording studio, which was toward the end of our European tour, and we did that in Berlin, we actually, I didn't know where it would go, because every night had been so different. And in fact, I just did an interview for I think a radio, and it was together with Dion Sok, who's the drummer, and I've been a little closer to the record because I was part of the post-production process, so I know it very well. But Dion, this was right before it came out, and my friend Dion, who's the drummer, she was asked about something, and she couldn't really remember. It's like, where did we end up in the recording studio? I don't quite remember, because every night was so different. So that's actually something that I really enjoy. Like, I try to keep the songs open enough for magic to unfold. And the cool thing about that is that if you play a gig in a very intimate space, and you have material that is pretty flexible, you can form it to the moment, to the people who are in the room, and to the acoustics. And then next day you might play at a bigger stage, maybe like a little hall or something, and you can adjust to that. So it's a real in the moment process.
And it's really obvious that you're doing that. I can hear the changes from the videos that I saw versus the recording.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice changes, and
Cool.
it's obvious that you provide that space. I was watching how she played drums, and
Yeah.
how she created certain colors with her sticks up against various types of equipment that she had, and was working with what's your guitarist's name again? I apologize.
Keiska.
Keiska, that's right. Um, and how those two were bouncing off of each other. They were really listening to each other. And then you would come in, and the stuff that you would add to that, the layers were so intertwined, and they mixed so well together. It really, I think Givers and Takers is a fabulous album. And by the way, it made my top 25.
Woo.
So
Glad to hear.
yeah. And I did post that to the Jazz Journalists Association.
Oh, amazing. I appreciate it.
I do enjoy it. I've listened to the album quite a number of times.
Amazing. Appreciate your ears.
Well, here on Strictly Jazz Sounds, one of the things that I have tried to do over the many years, when I had a radio show in WORT 89.9 FM in Madison, was to spend time with musicians whose music may not have attracted the big labels and attracted big time, but yet have such distinctive sounds that are worthy of attention. And I try to bring attention to them. So
Fantastic.
So yours was brought to my attention, and I really enjoyed it. Now, when you began to do this, well, no, let me ask it this way. You call it jazz. Is it jazz fusion? Is it jazz rock? There are those who want to pin this into a particular genre, or is it electronica, or is it just simply your sound?
It's a very good question. Genre is such a funny thing. I also think that musicians think about genre a little differently than presenters sometimes, because it's the presenters really want to market it or like put it into certain boxes, and as musicians, as you know, I'm sure, a lot of times we're just like, this is just music, so this is what I do. But I'm easy. I mean, everyone has a different association genre-wise. A lot of times I guess it runs under contemporary jazz. There's a lot of electronic influence these days. Anyway, fusion. The thing with fusion is like I associate fusion with a very particular time in jazz history, which is like the 70s and 80s, and it's definitely inspired partly by it, but it's not really fusion in that way. Although it fuses a lot of elements. So I usually say, so to be quite honest, I see myself as an instrumental songwriter. I'm a lot. I'm very inspired by song structures, and I'm kind of like trying to paint different sonic worlds with my music, and I also recognize that a lot of the coming from a saxophone player's perspective, I have a tendency to employ very lyrical melodies. So in a way, I see myself as an instrumental songwriter, and my band as a avant-garde song band, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
But yeah, so. But we improvise, so there's definitely we come from this jazz aspect, which I guess helped us land on strictly jazz sounds.
You know, with Keiska's sound, it was reminiscent to me of Jeff Beck.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Keiska started with the Beatles.
Yes, he did. Didn't he?
Fell in love with yeah. He fell in love with the Beatles, and I mean, you know, Jimi Hendrix went into that kind of thing, and then really got into different kinds of sounds. He has worked a lot with John Zorn, Jim Black, people like that. So, you know, free thinking musicians. But it's, yeah, I think so. There's definitely this rock influence in the music. Elias Stemmiseder, the key player, he's from Austria, and not that that means anything, but he did check out a lot of Joe Zawinul. So that's something that you might hear on tracks like Happy Happy, actually. You know, so there are a lot of different mixes in the blend, you know.
And you definitely have that mix. It's the novice in me in terms of that sound, because I have spent
Mm-hmm.
a lot more time with other avant-garde sounds. Explain
Mm-hmm.
in a very simple way, but in detail, what you do. How does this happen? So, for instance, I was
Mm-hmm.
watching a video of you doing a recording, and you obviously had already laid down some tracks or laid down a sound, but you had a keyboard or looked like a keyboard, and you had your saxophone, and you were doing something that I couldn't understand. It's almost Craig Tabornish in its
I
own
love
way.
Craig Taborn.
I thought you would like that name.
Yeah, that's that's a big idol for me for sure.
We saw him in Madison,
Oh my gosh,
uh,
solo.
solo.
Oh my god, that's the best.
He was remarkable. But so, if you could explain, let's pretend that you have your equipment right there and you're playing it. Lay it out as to how do you construct these layers.
I think what you're referring to is that video that's on YouTube with where I work with like Ableton Live, electronics.
That's right.
Okay, how did I construct that? That had some pre-production, so I I used a MIDI controller in form of a keyboard. I looked for sounds. I programmed my own sounds, and then kind of created some sonic layers that later I would record over. And then I have some audio effects that I put onto the saxophone, like a reverb first, a delay. I think I don't quite remember what I did on that, but sometimes like a grain modulator. So there are different effects where you can change the audio signal that comes in. So I play the saxophone into a microphone. The microphone takes the audio signal, and then you can manipulate it. And that's how I created these layers. But it had like a pre-production process happening.
So in the pre-production process, they or you would enter it using certain types of equipment, creating certain sounds.
Exactly. I use it's called a digital audio workstation. Short, we call it DAW. So
Okay.
there are different. It usually has an interface on the screen, and then you can. It kind of. I mean, it has so much power, and I don't know even like a tiny bit of it yet. Because it's so vast, and there are definitely people that are super deep into that. But I do. It's kind of like it simulates synthesizers. You know, like analog synthesizers. Sometimes you can pull up. You know, if you see an analog synthesizer, there you have all these knobs where you can change filters, frequencies, LFOs, you know, all these things, and you can basically do that on the computer as well. Then there are also like pre-programmed sounds that you can download and use and manipulate.
computers have made it a lot easier, I'm sure, than it was 45, 50 years ago when that happened.
Yeah, yes and no.
Really?
I think that sometimes I do think that, fun story. I mean, I did this video you were talking about. I did during the pandemic, and when the pandemic started, I thought, oh, I have time now for the first time in a long time. I'm gonna go really deep into that, and then I kind of noticed how at some point my attention really drifted actually away from it, and I went really deep back, and I started listening to Chu Berry and Lester Young and all these cats, and so I went really like minimal in a way, where I was said, okay, I mean, there's this vast, all these opportunities, but I feel like I already have so much um, to explore still on just the saxophone. That there are these two mindsets. Like on the one hand, like yeah, you can dabble with all of these electronics and you can do so much with it, but at some point, I'm like, sometimes it's good to also be restricted and be creative with just what you have. So I'm kind of like always tossed back and forth between these two different extremes.
So the acoustic sound really is a very beautiful sound. The tenor sound is, to me, in a band, is really the real full sound. And then you have the electronics that add to that, but
Absolutely, yeah.
the base of it, the bases of it, of the tenor is quite the sound. Kenny Barron was saying today it's too academic. There's not enough of that other sound that was there to anchor it in that, and it really has vastly changed. You're an academic now because you are the jazz studies director at Brown University. How do you respond to that?
That's a challenging statement. So it's a very common argument, right? That everything has become so academic and all the players sound the same. On the one hand, there's a truth to that. So, when the first jazz school started, especially with Berklee College of Music, there was this kind of teaching method that was adopted by a lot of other schools who were opening up because they saw Berklee was a big success. So, I mean, in Europe, every little town has a jazz program now. Asia is starting to have a lot of jazz programs. In the U.S., almost every college has a jazz program, and a lot of them adopted this Berklee method, looking at bebop music, because in a way, it was sort of easy to teach. So what happened that a lot of players, go through this kind of school, and especially a lot of young cats sound like that, On at the same time, I do think that an academic program can be very, very rewarding because what does it do? It brings people together who are into music, and more than ever, I hope, a diverse crowd comes together. So I think that there's a lot of room for getting inspired by the people and also finding your own sound by playing with other people. So I think the best thing for me about a school and about an academic context, if it's done right, is connecting people with one another and have them grow as musicians. The problem with a lot of academic programs, I think, is that they kind of stay within their insular thing, which is, I think, what Kenny Barron might have been hinting at. And Sonny Rollins, he was out in the Apollo Theater. He was hanging out in Harlem, learning from Monk.
Yeah.
From Coleman Hawkins, connecting with Duke Ellington. So
I mean, those who were his teachers,
exactly,
those
right.
who were his mentors,
and I know from friends and colleagues who have been teaching at other programs too. It's like, man, like these kids, they don't leave the school. They have to go to concerts. And a lot of times their scenes are small, but I think it's really, really important to go out. And I mean, that's the reason why I and a lot of my friends came to New York, because we wanted to see live music, And the school is a place where you learn. It's kind of like a vehicle. But I do agree that you really have to go see concerts, play with your friends, meet cats from other who are visiting town, like this very open mind toward new things, and the life experience I think is really important. But also times change. People are now listening to stuff on YouTube, on Instagram, and I'm not saying that's bad. It's just new, and so I'm not worried about the music itself, and I do think that there's a lot of individual voices out there who make great music, but it's different than it was in the 50s.
Well, Miles Davis went to Juilliard, and yet he would say, well, my real school is down on 52nd Street.
True.
And I know that back in Madison, Johannes Wallman, jazz studies director at University of Wisconsin-Madison, he has his students performing in the community and in a jazz club.
That's great.
And it gives these students opportunities to mix and mingle, to be with other jazz musicians. And there's another jazz educator who has actually already received her recognition. I think it was yesterday. There's Terry Lynn Carrington and the work that she's doing through Berkeley. And she's amazing. She's absolutely astounding. And the work that she's doing with Jazz Gender Justice Institute. You had said something about that jazz is your music is about community. And I'm hearing that more often from jazz musicians. Why don't you talk about that and what is essential for our music to bring people together? And I know Emmett Cohen talks about bringing people together. That he sees that as his mission, to bring people together through his music.
I'm from Europe originally, and I grew up, as you mentioned, we already talked about, I started on piano. So I got classical piano lessons and went through that European school, and it was great to a lot of extent. But one of the things that I didn't learn was it was always taken out of context. It was like you get a sheet music and it's text, and the text is it, right? So you're looking at pitches, you're looking at rhythms, maybe like dynamics and all that stuff. All the talk was always about like the musical parameters. But I don't think that music can ever exist outside of its context. So a lot of musicians, when we're trained from this Eurocentric point of view, a lot of times it's so focused on those parameters that we kind of forget that all the communal aspect of it, the coming together, the expressing of aesthetics, of our like predilections in terms of this is what we're into. Why are we into that? Because I've been hanging out with my friends who are listening to this. I think this is as much part of the actual music as pitch and rhythm is. And I think the awareness for that makes you take musical choices in a certain way that are more true to yourself and to your community. And so the music that I wrote for this record, Givers and Takers, is all music that I wrote during the pandemic. And it's not a pandemic album in terms of like, I want to express my loneliness because I'm at home all day. It's more it's just like something that I had already sort of known became really amplified, which is without the communal aspect of it, I can't really make music, I really, once things opened up again and we started going to clubs again and I saw my friends and we played in a room together, it was for and with people, I really realized, wow, this is what really kind of like gives me focus and steers my music. So I decided to call this album Givers and Takers for two reasons. One is giving and taking is the social praxis that music is related to, I think. I think this becomes very clear in an improvisatory context, especially, right? You like give and take ideas. And on the other hand, Givers and Takers is actually a bar in Brooklyn where my friends and I a lot of times used to congregate and talk about life, about music, about whatever. So it's like, okay, this is like this idea of the real community thing. And I mentioned earlier that I learned so much from my friends, and that's why when I put this group together, I asked some of my closest friends, because I knew that by having this trust between people, I can be really intimate and also like vulnerable. You know, I can be very, the music can be as intimate as possible, and that's something that I was going for on this record.
And it can be adventurous.
Exactly. Yeah. There's like, you can, you know, it's totally cool to fail. Like if you have close friends, they're not going to judge you. You know, like you play with one of,
They'll have your back.
yeah, like you call, you put a recording session together and you call one of the big stars, one of your idols, which is cool too. You should do it. But on the other hand, it's like there might be this, you might come in with this mindset of like, well, let me better not mess this up, you know. So it's like, you know, I think it yields different musical results.
As you're working on a composition and in Givers and Takers, it looks like you did this. You, with each composition, you had some social aspect to it, some community aspect to that composition. And Happy Happy was one that really struck me because it was so diverse in how you began it. And then, you know, 3.5, 4 minutes into it, all of a sudden it changes into this sound that you have on guitar, and the drum comes in, and the synth. I mean, it's thick. Talk about that. Talk about Happy Happy. I have another track that I want to specifically talk about, but talk about Happy Happy and how you created that.
Sure. Happy Happy is a tune that is, I wanted to write a happy tune because a lot of my other melodies always have this melancholic tendency because of, you know, a lot of my influences are from Radiohead and some other singer-songwriters that kind of, I like the warmth of these like minor chords that I usually write with. So I really tried to, it was basically an exercise for me in terms of, okay, let me try to write a happy tune. So I opted for a 5/4 meter, which has this bouncy, dancey feel to it, and then chose harmony and a melody that's bright and jolly. And then this is where the community aspect comes in. So I brought this piece into the band, and I actually worked. I think that's the composition that I worked longest on. Maybe because it was a little outside my comfort zone. I was like kind of experimenting with different sounds and ideas, and so it's like a 5-pager. It's pretty long, actually, you know. So I brought it in, and especially that second part that you were referring to, which becomes super dense in sonorities. That's really something that happened through the players that I played with. Like it happened on stage where we really started opening up that second part. And
Keiska really got into it.
Oh yeah, he rips it apart.
Oh, he does.
Yeah. So these destructive elements, that wasn't the original idea, to be honest. You know, it just so happened, and then we're like, this is cool. Let's go for it.
And you dug into it. You guys really worked. I mean, it's like you just kept working it out. It's like you were pulling it out and kept pulling it out until collectively you all said, "That's it."
Yeah.
That's the way. That's
enough.
It was enough. I'm all done with that. Let me move on to a book that you're writing about Manfred Eicher.
Supposed to be writing, yeah.
I was wondering if that was going to be said.
Yeah, life's busy, man. Yeah, no, I did finish my dissertation about Manfred Eicher, and I'm planning to turn this into a book. So I'm currently actually working on a book proposal. So just for some context, what I did for my doctoral dissertation, which I did at NYU, I was able to connect with Manfred and go to several of his studio sessions and observe them. So the work is really about, it's not a biographical work at all. It's really about what is happening behind these closed doors in the recording studio. Especially, as you say, he's an enigma, he's a mystery, because he's very private. For people that are outside his musical circle, which actually is a pretty big circle. I mean, they've made over 1,600 records to date, you know. It's very, very prolific. But especially for outsiders, so to say, he's extremely private. And the recording studio is really a sacred space for him and the musicians. So my interest was really like, how are they working, and how is this amazing music that we know from the records. How is this music being made? And what I do in my dissertation, what I will do in my book, is really provide a mosaic of a lot of different aspects that once you put them together, you hopefully start understanding, oh, okay, this is the thing. So it's actually really hard to, it's actually impossible to boil it down to one thing. But if you ask me what's the most interesting thing, the most interesting thing is maybe the supposedly most obvious thing is that Manfred Eicher is a musician, first and foremost.
That's interesting.
You know, people are always like, what is the ECM? How is the ECM sound made? Oh yeah, you put a lot of reverb into it and then you get the ECM sound. That's not the answer. The answer is really that Manfred Eicher is a musician with his own very strong aesthetic idea, and he is part of the musical process. And that can take very different shapes. If there's a band that is very open to it and that has the music that's very malleable and open and needs to get some shape, he actually acts as a musician who's giving cues, directing in the moment during the recording. But you can also have...
That's different than what a producer, a strict producer would do.
Right, exactly. So his role of a producer is very unique. But it can also be the opposite, you know? I mean, I think I talked to Craig Taborn, since we mentioned him, about it. I don't think... Craig told me that he never tells him anything about the music. He just lets him do, which is probably is because the musical message is so strong that you don't want to meddle with it, you know. So it really, but that's what I mean. He has such a musicianship that he can attune to the situations from a musical perspective, asking what does the music need and what does it not need. And I think that's the main answer. He's a musician.
That is about as succinct as it gets. He's a musician, and it works from that. You have another project?
Yeah, I should
underway.
Quite a few. I have something that I recorded last year as well, which is hopefully coming out this year, which was a live recording at a radio hall in Bremen. By the way, it's the same hall that Keith Jarrett recorded his famous Bremen album. It's a wonderful acoustic space, and I was invited to spend a day there from the local radio, the Radio Bremen. It was a concert in the evening, but they gave me the entire day to set up, record. So I invited some people: Ralph Alessi on trumpet, Chris Tordini on the bass, Thomas Strönen, Norwegian drummer, on drums, and Elias Stemmeseder, the same keyboarder as in my Fly Magic band, playing piano, but it's a completely acoustic recording, so no electronics whatsoever.
No electronics.
Yeah, so that's something that's coming out this year.
How did that feel?
I was thinking, like, I would really like to do something that's really acoustic for a change, and it was wonderful because the hall, I knew the hall, and it was really written for that purpose because there's a lot of reverberation, and I kind of took that resonance of the room into account, you know. So some slow pieces that breathe a lot, have a lot of air.
That all sounds really, and obviously you are a busy man.
Trying to keep busy.
Timo Vollbrecht does continue to be a busy man. Right now, he's closing out that 2023 academic year at Brown University while pursuing his recording dreams. So thanks to Timo for spending the time with me. The podcast theme is by University of Wisconsin-Madison Jazz Studies Director Johannes Wallman from his recording McCoy, which can be found on his album Precarious Towers. We're approaching festival season, so go out and support live jazz. And please subscribe so you can receive notices of future episodes and jazz news. And provide a brief review of the podcast. I can only do better. You've been listening to Strictly Jazz Sounds, your podcast of all things jazz. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve Browngen.